us.
Thank you.
Yeah, I might start a little bit about, my background, how I ended up at this startup, but more specifically what I did throughout high school to end up at Stanford in the first place. I applied as an engineering major. I was not really sure which one, so I kind of just went general engineering. My background consisted of, I did a little bit of research in biochemistry at UT Health Science, which is based in the medical center in Houston. I was focused on a certain receptor and the way that it moved upon pH activation. But what I really think I was passionate about and what I really pursued was public transportation. And the way I did this was my junior year of college. I'd always been passionate about public transportation, especially in a city like Houston, where it's not really there. And my junior year of high school, I decided I was going to pursue a passion project related to it. Houston was building a bus rapid transit line in the Uptown area, which is a bustling area near where both of us live.
Yeah.
And in a way, I saw it as a bridge to nowhere. It was starting from one transit center going to another, but it wasn't reaching any areas of interest. Specifically, I tied it to my family. My grandma was working in that area, and it was tough for her to come home because there was no great public transit. And, this line had the opportunity to fix that, but it wasn't. So that's why it originally started. I did a bunch of quantitative research, consulted with a infrastructure consulting group, learned how to model the financial incentives and the ridership projections, modeled it, and then presented it to the Metro Authority in Houston. And I got them to eventually add it into their 2040 plan to extend the line an extra 2 miles into my neighborhood. I think that was my biggest essay and the biggest thing that I was really, really passionate about. And I still am. So after that, I also wrote an essay about food reviews. I wrote about ratatouille, and I wanted to show that I'm a personable person as well, and I have this personality that's outside of quantitative research, etc.
Which essay was that? Which Stanford essay was that about?
It was tell us something you're passionate about. That's the one that I chose to write about food reviews. I wrote my Common App about the passion project in transportation. But tell us something you're passionate about. I wrote about how I review different restaurants throughout the world anytime I go travel. And I hold myself to a high standard, just like Antoine Ego and Ratatouille. So that's all about me. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end of this about my journey, but I'm going to actually pass it over back to Neel and let him tell you guys about his journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. For context, by the way, Ayush and I are both from Houston. We did not know each other in high school, but we actually met at the admit reception. We've been like really close friends ever since. That kind of fits into the inception of Ember. But yeah, as I said, I'm from Houston. I applied underneath material science. So throughout my high school years, I did a lot of research at Rice University in material science and nanoengineering. I can't tell you why it interested me. I just thought it was cool. Like, to be very naive, I remember in high school thinking, how do items work at the nanoscale and how can I be a part of that? And that's what spurred my interest in chemistry and physics. And I ended up going to Rice and doing research in their labs. I was specifically focused on sustainability. So one of my large projects at Rice was developing these biopolymer frameworks for carbon dioxide capture. And it was during my time at Rice where I was using all these crazy machines and doing all this lab work that I began to fill this role as a technical person. I realized that I am by nature a technical person. I enjoy software and I enjoy working with my hands, which is why I think I was so interested in material science. So I stuck with that. And outside of Rice, my other, for lack of a better word, spike, I guess is maybe the way to say it, was in my volunteer efforts with students with Down syndrome. So in America, special needs and disabilities are respected and they're given funding, but it's very difficult in other countries to be able to help adults and kids with special needs. And I volunteered at the Down Syndrome Association of Houston, which is a nonprofit in Houston, and they were setting up an overseas chapter in Bangladesh to help students there because in Bangladesh there's a strict stigma against people with special needs. So I did what I could to be able to set up that chapter. I worked on the technical side of it, which was basically creating slide decks and informational materials to sending tactile materials because children with Down syndrome, they have trouble using their hands as dexterously. So I wanted to be able to help in Houston as well as in Bangladesh. So those are my two things, was my Rice research and my advocacy efforts. In terms of essays, the way I approached them was, first of all, I want to acknowledge that when I wrote it, when I showed it, there were 11 essays. So it's a lot. It's a tough process. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's easy. But what I do think is important to realize is that the person reading your application does not know you. They know nothing about you. So what you are trying to do is show exactly who you are in 11 essays, which, you know, on a Friday night when you want to go out with your friends and you have to write an essay, you're like, oh, why do I have to write so much? But in the grand scheme of things, 11 essays is nothing. It's a really small amount of words. So you have to be very precise in the way you portray yourself. And I think my philosophy was, look, I'm starting from zero and I need to get to Neel. I need to go from nothing to who I am. And every essay, what I did is I tried to highlight a different aspect of my personality. What I also think it's important to do is don't regurgitate your application in your essay. And again, this is just my opinion. I can't base this on anything, but if you already put that I've done X, Y, and Z activities in your application, there's no need to again say it in the essays. Talk about personality in the essays because that's why they exist. There's no question on the application that says rate your personality on a scale of 1 to 10. It's done in the essays, and that's what I think the important part is. So that's me. I'm, again, happy to answer any questions you might have had about the admissions process, but that's our story and how we got to Stanford.
Right. This is what Neel was talking about he developed his narrative of he's done XYZ activities, and now he wanted to develop the narrative of who he is. And so that's what the focus on personality was for him. But yeah, these are our 3 steps to any application. Start early. It's early. It's important to start early, and then develop the narrative of who you want to be, because you can create that. And that's where I think Ember really fits in. You can create that narrative by talking to a Stanford student who has done it, has created their own narrative, and see, oh, okay, wow, I really like this aspect of it. Oh, I really liked how he pursued this passion, but also worked on something that matters, something that was bigger than him. Blah, blah, blah. Whatever it needs to be, you can learn from a student better than you can learn from anyone else about your narrative. And then obviously you work with Amy and you guys develop that narrative to be, you know, what it needs to be for essays, and you commit to it. And that's the whole process. So I want
to draw emphasis to exactly what he said is you have to create a narrative here. And I just, as he said about Ember, is we want to help you create that narrative. And the way we're doing that is we're saying, forget about all these generic college tours. Come here, talk to a student who's been through it, and then be able to craft information about a school. I remember when I went into my interview, my Stanford interview, the first question I was asked was, what do you know about Stanford? Was the first question I was asked. My assumption is the reason they're asking me is because they want me to have shown demonstrated interest. And what we're doing at Ember is providing you with a means of achieving that demonstrated interest, because you're booking this experience because you are interested. Case in point, right? So we want to give you that ability to craft that narrative and then work with Amy and put together the best application that you can.
What did you tell? What was your answer?
For which question? For my narrative?
What do you know about Stanford?
Oh, I said, so I had actually come here and done research. So I collaborated with a Stanford professor as part of my research at Rice University. So I said, first of all, I know the weather is fantastic. I remember we would do our lab work outside and then go back into the lab. But I also said there's an emphasis at Stanford, not just on the research work that's done, but on the impact that it has. So I remember a lot of the projects I was working on with Stanford professors was not what are we going to get done, but it's what is it going to achieve. So there would be projects that were tabled because one was determined to have greater impact than the other. So I think a lot of what happens at Stanford is incredibly intentional, and that's something that I really prioritize in my life is intentionality.
That is an excellent answer.
Oh, thank you.
Well, obviously.
That's what Stanford did. And that's what I want to be able to help students understand is, look, Stanford prioritizes a lot of great things and maybe some not so good things, but we're here to give you those answers.
Well, what I'm enjoying right now in this webinar is hearing your extensive, rich narratives, because, and you know, for the students and parents who work with us and people who are also new to Blue Stars, who are thinking about college planning, people come with simpler stories in their minds, in their imaginations than what's really expected. So having these concrete examples and, you know, talking about your passion projects in this extensive way, I think is very helpful. So I just, first of all, before we get questions, I just want to say thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Thank you. And we're happy to field any questions you might have, I believe. Yeah, I mean, that's the end of our slides. It's the link, I think Amy might have sent it to you guys. It's tourember.com. Experiences are ready to go. We're live at Berkeley. We're ready to have you. We're ready to match you with a student that's just like you. You can contact us at these emails. These are our personal emails. We get back to you pretty quickly. And yeah, thank you for having us, Amy, and we're happy to answer any questions.